Our next guest got the chance to coach him, be a part of that glorious ride, and I'm sure can shed some light on what kind of person Darren Daulton was. He's the current Phillies bench coach, Larry Bowa. He joins us now on the Sports Bash 97.3 ESPN. Thanks for joining us, Larry. How are you?
I'm doing okay, Mike. How are you?
Very good. It's great to have you today. I know it's under some tough circumstances, and I've read some of the things that you've had to say about Dutch. And one of the things I wanted to ask you is, being a fiery guy, a leader guy yourself, from one guy watching another guy, what you saw in him that kind of drew you, because you were a fiery player yourself, and he was a leader in different kind of ways.
Well, obviously, on that 1993 team, we had a bunch of guys that were towards the end of their careers, and to do what we did was something special, and Dutch had a lot to do with that. He wasn't afraid to confront anybody if he thought they weren't doing the right thing. It wasn't like he jumped guys for little things. They were something that maybe a guy didn't hustle, or maybe a pitcher shook him off 3 or 4 times. He was always prepared to play, and I think the thing that stands out in my mind is that people don't realize that what he had to go through to play every night. He went through about 9 knee operations. He was there at 1 o'clock every day for a 7 o'clock game, and then after the game, he would hang out with the coaches and maybe a couple players and sit down and just maybe have a cold one and talk about baseball. He did this every night. And so when those guys that came in had a few aches and pains, or their hamstrings were tight and they didn't think they could go that night, Dutch made it a point to let them know exactly how important it was for them to take the field every single night and be accountable. And that had a lot to do with the success of that team. And the other thing was that he didn't really care about his individual stats. He just wanted to win. I've seen him go for 4 with 4 strikeouts, but catch a shutout, and he was just as elated about that as if he'd hit a game-winning home run. So there were a lot of intangibles that he brought to the table that had nothing to do with stats. And, that's why he was important for that 93 team.
Was that something that he grew into? Did he have? I mean, at what point does he become Dutch?
I think he grew into that. Obviously, when guys first come up and you're not a prolific hitter or you're not a quote-unquote superstar, you tend to just stay in the background and watch the guys that put up big numbers. Dutch wasn't that kind of guy. He realized that you could be a leader if you hit 220 or 320. If you're a leader, it doesn't matter if you got 3 hits on night. A leader takes responsibility even when he's going bad, and sort of builds everybody up around him. And so he took that over. And then in that 1993 team, we had a bunch of guys that put up big numbers, and Dutch was one of them. But prior to that, in fact, one game, Dutch, Jim Fregosi pinch hit for him because he wasn't hitting very well. And he couldn't believe it, even though he always believed that no matter what his average said, he's going to go up there and get a hit, no matter what the situation was. But I think he sort of evolved into that leadership thing and wasn't afraid of it, or wasn't afraid to confront people. Like I said, he didn't look for problems, but if there was a problem being created, he and the coaches, he had a lot to do with me and Vuk. Him and I and Vuk were pretty close, same personalities basically. And, it sort of evolved like that. But, again, I don't think you teach that. I think you either have it or you don't. And I think that as he became a player and established, he felt he could take over that role.
Larry Bowa is with us. Now, in 92, he leads the league in ribbies. I mean, he's an all-star, silver slugger. After really, I remember growing up watching him batting eighth most of the time. I mean, he was in 1980s and 90s, the catcher batted eighth, either the catcher or the shortstop batted eighth and played great defense, right? And then all of a sudden, one day, he was batting second. Like, it was just like, let's just bat him second and see what happens here. And in 92, he kind of took off all of a sudden. At the end of 92, did you guys see, like, we got something here with him, that he can maybe be a guy that we can tie some veterans together and do something?
Yeah, but I'll be honest with you. I didn't think we would get to the World Series because we had a bunch of players, obviously, that was toward the end of their career. But yeah, you could see that in Dutch in '92. You know, people don't understand that when you start your career off through hard work and dedication, you can become something. These guys that think they're accepted hitting 220 or 230 and don't want to work at it, that's another story. You know, Dutch worked at it. He wanted to be more than a 220 hitter, and it took a lot of hard work. A lot of that hitting had to do with his bad knees also. You know, it's hard to hit when you both your legs are you have problems with your knees, and but he overcame all that stuff and he worked hard. But his main priority was catching. He could care less about his batting average. He could care less about home runs. You know, he wanted to give the pitcher, put them in a position to win every night. And a mark of a good catcher is when a pitcher goes out there with mediocre stuff, and he can navigate that pitcher through 7 or 8 innings. That's the mark of a good catcher, and Dutch did that a lot with our pitching staff. You know, with the exception of a Kurt Schilling, who was on most of the time, he would navigate pitchers through 6, 7, 8 innings, and he took a lot of pride in that.
So Larry Bowa is with us here. Obviously, as a coach on that team, with being a great player yourself, being in the World Series, you see this team kind of materializing, and they get off to this. You just said it yourself. You didn't expect to be there where they were. Was there something that Dutch maybe did, or somebody on that team? Because I would assume he had to be in the mix to kind of set the tone for that season, maybe even in Clearwater.
Well, I think in Clearwater, you know, a lot of times, you know, you're stretching in that, and, you know, they have the predictions of where teams are going to come in. I don't know exactly where we were predicted to come in, but it sure as heck wasn't first. And I remember him stretching, and you know, when guys stretch, you walk around through the ranks and talk. And one comment one day was, "I hope you guys don't read all those predictions, because that's not going to happen here." I mean, little things like that. Then once you start playing and you go into the season in April and things started happening, and then the second half, you know, you could see things materialize. We had a series, I believe, I'm not positive, but I think it was against the Cardinals. It was a 4-game series, and I think, I'm not sure who the player was for the Cardinals. It said, well, we'll go in here and beat the Phillies 3 out of 4, put them in our rearview mirror. And we swept them. But when that comment came out, you know, Dutch's comment was, well, we'll just see how this plays out, boys. But he was always one to say, stay humble. You know, after you win 2 or 3, just keep quiet, and we'll do our business. Same as when we play in the Braves in the playoffs, we win a couple. And he would say, hey, nobody talk, we got work to do.
Yeah.
And always keep everybody grounded, but also let them play with an edge. And I think in today's game, there's not a lot of guys that play with an edge. And the ones that do play with an edge, they're special. He played with an edge. And by that I mean guys knew, be accountable, you know. And that's what it's all about, accountability. And he held everyone. And you know what? When you have a veteran team like they had, like we had in '93, it's hard for veterans that had pretty good careers in other organizations to toe that line. And he had a way of getting his point across. And to this day, to me, the most important part when you play this game is be accountable to yourself, your teammates, and the organization. And that doesn't exist very much now.
No.
But it did exist in '93 because Dutch had a big impact on that.
Well, you just said something. I was watching the MLB Network, did a little tribute to him in one of the videos. In there, he's saying, now don't go popping off to the paper. We still got another game. That was after Game 5 against the Braves. But, you know, a lot of times, Larry, the leader or the guy who's the mouth in the clubhouse isn't liked. That's not the case here. Like a lot of people, that rubs them the wrong way, especially in today's day. That doesn't seem to be the case. It seems that everybody off the field respected him.
I'm sure that when he first, and I don't have any names, but I'll guarantee he rubbed some people the wrong way at the beginning. But then they realized what he was all about. It was all about winning. And when other players realize that that's the reason you are jumping them, in the long run, they say, you know what, that's what this is all about. And that's the big difference in today's game and back then. If you got a guy that takes time to go out of his way to help you, whether it's getting on you or patting you on the back or kicking you in the rear end, that means he cares about you, he cares about the organization, and he cares about winning. And those guys that take it the wrong way, in my opinion, are losers. And Dutch had a way of, like I said at the beginning, I guarantee 25 guys. A couple guys probably said, what's with Dutch and that. But by the time the season got well in the way and we started playing, every guy in that room respected him and understood why he did the things that he did.
Larry Bowa is with us here. And look, I think the fact that he was able to get that World Series championship kind of personified that he, grinded through the knee injuries and just kept plugging. It was really, satisfying to see him. And he contributed to that 97 Marlins team.
Right. And, when you see guys that they're that dedicated and you feel there's a void in their resume, even though we went to the World Series in 93, which I still think, we could have won that very easily. Not easily, but we could have won that. The fact that he never got to a World Series until after he left Philly, you'd like to see that one area, that check mark checked off that, hey, he played on a World Series team. It was a very important cog in that World Series team. And the Phillies really didn't want to trade him, but they knew how much he wanted to win, and it was a situation where they did him a favor. And Dutch was reluctant to leave, too. But he knew that you only get so many chances at winning a World Series. And Jim Leland will be the first to tell you that he was an integral part when he came over from Philly to the Marlins of them winning the World Series. And to see that happen and to see what he endured throughout his career with the knee operations and not being a real good hitter when he first came up to being a tough out, to see him win that World Series was very gratifying.
Larry Bowa, before we let you roll, the last 4 years obviously have been tough for him, but I had been to spring training. I've gone down for, 12 straight years, and I would run into him all the time, and that seems to be, what personified being a member of the Phillies was, that you're there. I know he made his home there, so it was easy, but he came out to the ballpark. You'd see him at the Palm Pavilion. You'd see him at the Clear Sky Cafe having breakfast. I mean, he was around when Philly fans were out, and he said hello to almost everybody, it seemed like.
Yeah, he did. And, I was telling a story this morning that Dave Hollins and him, I rent a house down there the last 3 or 4 years. And after a game, Dave would come over and Dutch would come over with Amanda, his wife, and my wife. And we'd sit there and we'd just sit out on the patio and talk baseball. I mean, the days are long down there. You get up at 5 in the morning. The game's over at 6. When they came over, we would sit out there till 11:30, 12 o'clock at night and just talk baseball. And a lot of the issues that really bugged him more than anything is the way guys play now. But the one thing that bugged him more than anything is the home plate collision rule. And if you watch some of the video of him, the hits that he took blocking home plate, he just shook his head saying, this game's really changed. He said, I don't know if I could play during this era now. Because he was, like I said, I told somebody to go YouTube when Ray Langford and Dutch had a collision in St. Louis. It was probably the hardest collision I've ever seen at home plate. But that's how he played the game. And he sort of laughed at when we talked about baseball, about the rules now. You got to give a guy a lane. You can't hit him. And but it was good times. When Dave was there and Dutch was there, you got to reminisce a lot. And those two guys sort of were the backbone of that team, but Dutch definitely was the leader of that team. And without him on the team in 93, there's no doubt in my mind the Phillies don't even come close to winning.
Right, and take out 80 and 08, that team there might be the next most popular franchise and maybe one of the more popular franchises out of all the teams in the city. Just people love that team.
Yeah, well, people love guys that they're blue-collar players.
That bust it.
I try to spread that word with these kids that we're having now, that if you want to get on their good side, play the game the right way. And that's something that Dutch learned, I learned. All the guys that came up that have spent a lot of time in the Phillies have learned. And they don't understand. A lot of them don't understand the city. And if you lay it on the line every night like he did, and you give everything you have, and you go out there hurt, I'm sure there was a lot of games where he said, man, I can't go tonight. that you go out there hurt and lay it on the line, the fans in Philadelphia will appreciate what you mean and what you've done for that team. And I think he did that as well as anybody.
Well, Larry, we know you guys have the off day today, so we appreciate you coming on. And obviously, a close friend of yours passing. It's very tough, but we do appreciate a couple minutes of your time.
Well, thank you very much. And again, like I said, our prayers go out to Amanda and the kids. She's an unbelievable woman, and she's had a tough last 3 or 4 years here because Dutch, probably the last 5 or 6 months, things haven't really gone too well. But she's a tremendous person, and our prayers go out to her and the kids.
Larry Bowa, everybody. Thank you so much, Larry.
Okay.